Welcome to my Wizardry 7 expert playthrough from Wizardry 6 Import. This video will explain the strategy I have defined for the game and is in a similar style to what I showed on my Wizardry 6 strategy review. So the race and class layout should look familiar. It's important to note that I expect all characters to be imported at max stats, or at least everything at 14, if not at 18. It's also important that I'm anticipating all characters having already learned ninjutsu, kirajitsu, all 4 magic schools, with the exception of theology for the Felper. Sending the Felper through the Valkyrie route on Wizardry 7 is much easier, and we'll get that skill this time around. In all cases except the Dwarf, if you happen to randomly hit the lottery and are offered Samurai while multiclassing, take it so that you can learn Nuclear Blast as soon as possible. In my playthrough, this happened naturally, a couple times actually for each character. Um, and so I didn't have to force it through save scumming too much. Regarding progression paths, only the elf has a particularly difficult route to their final class, needing 8 points to reach Psionic and then another 6 to reach the bishop. So starting for Ghost, they're going to be imported in as a ninja, and they're going to ping pong back and forth between ninja and Valkyrie, getting all of the schools up and running. Once they get to Samurai, that will lead them through Ranger and back to Valkyrie. Once that is all finished out, make a quick stop through Psionic to get Psionic Blast and any other Psionic spells, then back to Ranger, and finally ending up back at Ninja where you started. Blade will start out as a Samurai, and then switch between Valkyrie and Ninja, getting the Priest and Alchemist spells. Make a stop through Monk to get Psionic spells before finally coming back to Samurai to finish out. Now, switching to Samurai midstream just requires going back through Ranger and then back to Valkyrie. The Dwarf, starting out as a Monk, and then switching between Samurai and Ninja. This is the character that should get Nuclear Blast first, because it'll be in Samurai, and also requires the least amount of points, because they can, from Ninja to Samurai only requires 3 points, and Samurai back to Ninja is nothing. Making a quick stop through Valkyrie to pick up any priest spells, and finally back to Monk to finish out the game. Hildur is starting out as a Valkyrie. We'll make a stop through Monk, and then we'll go between Ranger and Valkyrie to get Priest and Alchemist spells, ending up at Valkyrie. It will make a trip through either Bard or Samurai, Bard most likely, and it'll go straight back to Ranger to get back into rotation. I also did have the ability to go back to Monk at some point and finish out some Monk spells like Mind Flay and whatnot. Eagle will start as a Valkyrie, and we'll go between Ninja and Valkyrie for that rotation. So again, same as Ranger and Valkyrie for Alchemist and Priest, but in this case it's Ninja instead of Ranger. And then from Samurai back to Ninja is a bit of a lift, but not too bad. And then ending back up at Ranger is easy. Minerva, which is my bishop at the end, is the biggest problem, mainly at the end. So Valkyrie to Monk to pick up the Psionic, at least a few of them, and then Ranger Valkyrie to get, just like the others, Alchemist and Priest, switching to Samurai when the opportunity presents itself, and then before getting to Bishop, because we need to get to 15 and 15, you could see that would take 4 and 5. So I chose to go through Psionic, which would also get me a chance to pick up any Psionic spells, because a Bishop is only Priest and Mage. And then back to Bishop. So moving over to the item and equipment loadout section, it's worth noting, excuse me, that you will be doing quite a bit of equipment transfers between characters and Wizardry 7 while multiclassing. The only exception to this is the Fairy, which has a special equipment compatibility list that is more or less the same across every class. You may have to give a character substandard equipment, or in some slots, no equipment at all. Don't worry though, if that's a big problem, just put them at the back row and heal them up quickly. But it's usually not an issue. The late game equipment loadouts, or locations I should say, are defined in this column over here. And in most cases requires save scumming chests to get what we want. The wild card in Wizardry 7 is whether or not you can access Don Barlow's treasury in the Funhouse, which is why I've got it down here at the bottom. That's going to depend on whether or not Rasputin or possibly Mick the Pick are alive. They need to be alive when you meet Barlone, and then you need to run into them after you meet Barlone before they die. Unfortunately, they tend to die pretty quickly. So if they are not, or you don't get to them in time, you won't be able to get to the Anointed Cloak. I didn't find any other place that would provide it in the game other than the Funhouse Treasury. It's one that I had picked for taking into Wizardry 8 with me, but in my case, the Book of Nox is probably a decent stand-in. The Anointed Cloak is a -1 armor class for the Bishop. The Bishop really shouldn't be getting hit, so it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's still, disappointing. So the transfer rules into Wizardry 6 are a bit more complex than from 6 to 7. So in there, you can only transfer one Tier 3 item and two Tier 2 items. And in this case, they don't have to be equipped to transfer. The only item that must be equipped to transfer is the Diamond Ring, or Ring of Stars, or Cameo Locket, whichever you chose. In my case, all diamond rings. All other items must be Tier 1 and will transfer freely up to a maximum total item count. If you're wondering why each character doesn't have the same number of items, there's some gray spots in here. Each character will be granted the default gear for their Wizardry 8 class, unless they are holding another equipable option, whether that be better or worse. So I'm leaving some spots blank with that mechanic in mind. So I've highlighted the Tier 3 items blue and the Tier 2 items orange. Items highlighted yellow cannot be transferred, either because they're Tier 4 or they've got some special exemption. The skill focus area is similar to Wizardry 6, except that I've also identified which characters should receive the super skills that you only get one instance of. The Ninja benefits greatly from the extra melee power from Power Strike. The Samurai tends to get targeted a lot, so the Reflection helps to evade those hits more effectively. Giving Eagle Eye to the Ranger increases their hit rate from the back row, and allows the Ranger to use true ranged weapons effectively prior to the end game. Unfortunately, ranged weapons in Wizardry 7 tend to be fairly inaccurate, so the bonuses from Eagle Eye plus being a Ranger class mitigates the problem down to a tolerable level. I personally don't use ranged weapons, but, you got to give it to somebody, and that's as good a person as any. Finally, the Bishop class is very slow in general, so giving it snake speed allows it to cast spells much earlier in the round, usually being the first to act overall. Acting first is very helpful when casting buffs and debuffs, which you'll see if you watch the videos on my playthrough. Finally, Wizardry 7 allows for non-linear story progression because most storylines are self-contained. Therefore, it is possible to define your own unique progression sequence to finish the game. This is heavily influenced by which ending you choose in Wizardry 6, which determines which area you start the game in and how the various factions view you initially. In my case, I selected the neutral ending that drops you in the area of the Dane Tower. Starting from this area allows easy access to the Mind Control super skill very early in the game, and leaves both the Yumpani and Tirang story options wide open. Note that you should not enter the Dane Tower level 4 until you are at a much higher level. And after learning the Mind Control skill, I move on to the traditional starting area and progress through like a non-imported party would. Starting with the beginner dungeon and new city. On the subject of resurrection potions that you brought with you to get some spending money, it's important to only sell them as you need to for purchasing power. There are several events in the game that will steal your money, for lack of a better word, and the amount requested is a percentage of what you currently have. So the game progression is Dane Tower, like I said, then going back to the beginner area, then New City, then Orc Ogre, then part of Munkarama, then most of Ukpir, then the area between Ukpir and Wreck and Ruins, then Wreck and Ruins. At that point now I should have gotten enough experience to go through all my class changes, got all my skills, and we can do the final class change. And then we start for real on the story. So we pick up a few things from New City. Then we pick up some new gear that I intentionally skip. Then we get to Nyctalinth to get a piece of gear we need for the Ratkins, the funhouse specifically for Barlone. Then we go through the Ratkin area and the funhouse. Then we follow back up with the area between the Ratkins and the Ukpir. Finally finishing out Ukpir. Then going back through Old City, or New City I should say, which is Old City Dungeon. And then back up to Nyctalinth, saving a Helizoid on the way. Finishing out Nyctalinth, then back to New City to pick up a Moonstone, then finishing out Munkarama, then getting the Legend map from Frolly Roulette, then finishing out the Dane Tower, then killing Blind Mice to get the Cane of Corpus. Hopefully by now we've gotten Barlone's treasure. Then we'll come back to New City to finish out a few things and get the boat. Then we do the first level of the Isle of the Crypt, then go towards Dragon Cave and onto Sky City, then back to the Isle of the Crypt for level 2, then do some level ups. This one can be skipped. Endgame forests are optional. Then finish out any Gorers, which are like the Uber bosses, optional bosses. Then the final dungeon. Then see if we can kill the hardest Gorer, which is the Beast of 1,000 Eyes. Finally preparing for transfer to Wizardry 8 and completing the game. So the last thing that's worth noting in this is that each map area can remember items dropped in a given cell, up to both a per cell and a global limit for the area. Therefore, you can drop items to save on bag space or weight, and come back to pick them up later. It doesn't tell you if you've reached a limit, and if you drop more items, it will delete the oldest one. I like to store my unneeded quest items in New City, and the items I am holding onto for Wizardry 8 in the beginner dungeon. Everything else is sold off, just like in Wizardry 6. So, final thing on this is the security questions in case you're running the DOSBox version that gives you the prompt. So I've got found these on one of GameFAQs, I believe. So shout out to whoever did that. Very helpful. And that way I don't actually have to have the menu or go look them up. So I hope you enjoy my playthrough. Thanks for watching.